The Joe Rogan Experience.
You know what I think, and this is just one of the times, I think of this sometimes, I'm not married to this, but I think that you have the possibility to occasionally get these glimpses of maybe senses that are evolving in human beings. And you can call it intuition, you can call it some connection you have with somebody, especially with someone you really love, like your family or loved ones or someone you really care about, and you think about them and then they call. It's almost like, man, there was some sort of a connection between people that just comes in and out. It goes in and out. Like sometimes you're thinking about someone, they text you. Like, is that just total coincidence? It might be. But it also might be that there's some weird, hard to define, impossible to measure connection that we all share with each other.
I think it's a beautiful way to look at it. I thought about that one day when I was just, thinking about my dad. I was traveling, and it made me think about thoughts and how thoughts are almost like messages we send out into the universe to just let somebody else know they're not alone, and maybe they grab them through some way. It's through some realm or portal. And it's important to conversation is so important because of that, because it reminds you of things and you draw associations. I was talking about my father one day, and you know John Heffron?
Yeah, sure.
He sent me a message, and it was while my dad was sick, and I was just, very upset about it. And John was just like, I went through the same thing that you did. I want to let you know that hearing is one of the last senses to go when people are sick. So just so you know that your dad can still hear you. And I had been afraid to call my dad during this whole process because I didn't want to know what he had forgotten. And so John sent me that message on a Sunday. And because he sent me that message, it made me think about my dad. And I was like, I haven't called him in so long. I'm just going to call him tonight. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time. He was in his, what is it, like hospice? What's the last place that people go? Is it like the nursing home is usually like right before people are passing? I think it's like a nursing home.
Well, nursing homes certainly are a place where a lot of people wind up passing.
I think he went from memory care facility to the nursing home, and I called the night nurse. And my dad couldn't talk at that point. But because I said something and John thought about it and sent me this DM, I'd never met him before. And that DM made me want to call my dad, and I called the night nurse. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning in Syracuse, New York, and I go, I know my dad can't hear me right now, but can you just tell him that I love him and I'm thinking about him? And Karen, I think her name was, she said, sure, I can go in and I'll tell him, I'll whisper it into his ear. And that was about 4 o'clock. And, about, what was that, 1 o'clock here, whatever the time difference is. And so I fell asleep. My sister calls me about 20 minutes later. My dad passed away right after the nurse went in to tell him that.
Whoa.
And I can consider that a coincidence. Sure, we can chalk it up to a coincidence, or it could be what you're speaking about, where there is some sort of deep connection that we have that we can't express or articulate with words. Even though these words that were sent to me are the thing that motivated me to talk to my dad, there's something to the effect that maybe there's something mystical going on. Maybe there's something that we're not meant to explain.
Maybe the problem is the word mystical. The problem is that we're looking at it like it's some sort of a magic thing. And we're calling bullshit because so many people pretend to have it and don't.
And there's no real science to sort of back it up.
There's zero.
Yeah.
And there's also been, like, the Amazing Randy's put out a reward where James Randi, I think it's $1 million if you can prove any psychic ability, and no one's been able to win it.
Well, how do you prove things of the brain?
You'd have to do it through, well, here's the thing. If it is, let's just go wild here.
We need Neil deGrasse
Tyson. He would never allow this. He would cut this off. Never allow this kind of nonsense.
He doesn't want the curtain behind it.
He would entertain it with a scientific perspective. But if you're looking at something like an emerging characteristic of human beings, like, for instance, like, we know that we used to be single-celled organisms. It's very unlikely that during a time we were single-celled organisms.
For like 30
we could
minutes.
talk, or we could feel, or we could do interpretive dance, okay? No one was writing books when they're single-celled organisms. So as these single-celled organisms become multi-celled organisms, become human beings, like, things are getting more and more complex, and more skills, and more senses, and more of an ability to manipulate their environment. And I think that it only makes sense that there could be some non-local connection that we have to each other, some way without just touching or talking or through visual. There's some sort of a connection that we have with each other that we just haven't evolved yet. It's on the way. It's coming. It's coming. And that's why we long for it. That's why we're really interested in psychics. We're really interested in people that know the future. Not just because we want to know what the future is. We want some sort of a feeling of hope
and interconnectivity.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's also that I think we know there's something to it.
Well, I think we know there's something grander beyond just this physical existence that we have. And then it brings up the whole conversation about the creation or existence and introduction of consciousness. When does that come into the picture?
Well, when did it come into the picture, right?
Yeah.
When was the first thing conscious? And what is consciousness? Is it just sentience? Is it just being aware and looking out for yourself? Because then deer are conscious. Are rats conscious? Because it seems they're pretty conscious too.
It seems like I think there's a spectrum to consciousness.
Right.
And I think that one that we're talking about is the beyond, that like consciousness that
next
level where
yeah, it's got to go somewhere, right?
It's got to go somewhere. I mean, look at our brains. Our brains are like a universe in of itself, and they're in the darkness until death. I mean, you can't even, there's no way to really, besides like graphs and everything, to really understand the workings of the brain. I mean, it's firing, all this electricity is going off, and these little teeny molecules are doing jobs, and there's
like we said earlier, sometimes it works great, and sometimes it's dog shit.
Yeah. It's really wild.
Same person.
It's really, it's so crazy. And then there's like this thing that happens in the brain and in the body, this like immune response where they send out this molecule. It's almost like a Paul Revere of molecules where it lets all the other molecules in the body know that some shit's about to go down. It's like a warning.
Right, like adrenaline.
Like a warning
spike.
Response. Yeah, but like little teeny, there's actual little microscopic things that are doing these jobs.
Yeah.
What the fuck? How do they start their day?
Right.
Are they waking up like Joe Rogan and going working out for an hour?
You don't even know they're there.
No, you don't even know that. That's why I fucking talk to him, bro.
Dude, I get it.